All right, so here we go with Chapter 4, A Life of Crime. So the title should kind of make you think, emphasizing on crime. I don't think it's Franklin. Sarah Kervick was very interested in my mother's van. She pressed the window button a couple of times and let her hands travel back and forth along the seat until she saw me watching her. Then she stopped and looked out the window. "I'm Julia, by the way," my mother said after she turned the volume on the radio down. "Oh, hi," Sarah said, all shy. "And you are?" "Sarah Kervick," I told her. "Sarah," she repeated after me. "Just Sarah?" It wasn't far to our house. As we turned into the driveway, I saw it the way Sarah Kervick might have. Just another boxy brick ranch built in the 1950s to withstand a nuclear explosion. It rose out of the center of a ring of vegetation that threatened to swallow it up. In late spring or summer or even fall, our yard is filled with flowers and flowering bushes and trees. My mother is a little obsessive about flowers. And since she's careful not to breed allergy-inducing plants, I can enjoy them too. Except the strongly scented ones, or lilies with stamens that stain your clothes, or bee-attracting varieties. Allergic reactions to bee stings have caused the untimely death of many a child. But just now in mid-March, the dried puffs of hydrangea blossoms lay beaten at the edge of the lawn, and the ferns looked as if someone had singed them with a blowtorch, their fronds all brown and crackled on the ground. The grass areas were respectable enough, except where my mother and I had worn them away, she forcing me to engage in that medieval event otherwise known as batting practice, and me jumping to get out of the way of her pitches. "I like this house," Sarah said under her breath as we pulled into the driveway. "But who's he?" I followed her finger to Bernie Lepner, who was currently tucked away under one of our yew bushes. Remember, Bernie is the little neighbor. My mother calls Bernie a dreamy. He's in fourth grade, and his favorite game is still make-believe. And his favorite place to make believe is in the bushes around our house. You see, Bernie's parents are more traditional. They favor the lollipop bush style of landscaping. Their yard is tidy and sanitary and unlikely to attract vermin. But it doesn't lend itself well to make-believe. "Hey, Bern," my mother said as she jumped out of the van. "What's going on in Rebeltown?" Rebeltown is the name of the kingdom Bernie has created under our front porch. "Hi, Julia," Bernie said, smiling up at her from under a cloud of bangs. "There's a porcupine stampede going on right now." "This is our friend Sarah," my mother said. Bernie gave Sarah a smile too, as she and my mother bent closer to see the action. He'd scattered the prickly poppy husks from last summer across the ground beneath the yew bush. They were his porcupines. I wasn't so interested in this because it was one of Bernie's favorite episodes and he replayed it several times a month. "Franklin, I got another name for our list." "That's fine," I said. "We can talk about it later." "Stuart Little, he has a boating accident," Bernie replied, flicking over some porcupine casualties with his finger and ignoring my request. "So he does. And a terrible leak in his birch bark canoe, so that's 2 water accidents." "Yeah, okay. Well, we've got to do some work here," I said, backing up the front steps, hoping Bernie would get the hint. And he gets rolled up in a window shade, but I wasn't sure how to classify that. Sarah Kervick had picked up one of Bernie's porcupines and was stroking it with her finger. "What's he talking about?" she asked. "Well, Bernie and Franklin have this list of characters in literature who are most likely to die in a preventable accident," my mother said, wiping the dirt off her hands and standing up. "It's something they do for fun." "We already got Pippi Longstocking, Tom Sawyer, the Hardy Boys, Peter from Heidi, Jack the Giant Killer, and Ralph the Motorcycle Mouse, but we haven't ranked them yet," Bernie said in a rush. "We're trying to decide if we should make 2 lists, or one for kids and one for the animals." I made a mental note never to share any classified information with Bernie. Sarah Kervick stood up and carefully replaced Bernie's porcupine. Wiping her hands on her dress, she headed up the steps with my mother. "Some fun," she said. Bernie went back to his porcupine battle plan. What else could I do but follow my mother and Sarah Kervick? Normally, after school, my mother and I debrief at the kitchen counter. She tells me the joke that her boss pastes in the water cooler while I wash my hands. Then I slice up some organic fruit and muesli, and she eats one of those prepackaged snacks filled with artificial dyes and preservatives. "Want a Twinkie?" she asked Sarah, pressing me up against the lip of the sink in her haste to get to the pantry. "Sure," Sarah said. I'd never seen her so agreeable. I tried once again to lather up my hands, but my mother jostled past me for a second time, disturbing my concentration. I'd been humming the happy birthday song under my breath, and her body blocks made me lose my place. "Chocolate milk? Do you have some?" The way Sarah Kervick asked, with such astonishment, it was as if she'd never seen chocolate milk and Twinkies in the same place before. While it seemed irresponsible for my mother to lead Sarah Kervick down the road to nutritional ruin, I wasn't about to say so. I waited for her to raid the refrigerator once again before I reached in and pulled out an organic apple. "So, how'd it get this way, your hair?" my mother asked after they'd settled at the kitchen table. Sarah Kervick picked up her Twinkie and put it down again. She shrugged her shoulders. "Fair enough." My mother grabbed a paper napkin from the pile in the middle of the table. "Sometimes things just get away from you. Now, you get to ask me a question." Sarah smiled a little smile to herself and looked down at her plate. She took a wolf-sized bite from her Twinkie and just sort of snapped it in two and said through the food, "So, it's just you and him that live here?" My mother returned the smile. "Yeah, just me and him," she said. Then she leaned forward on her elbows and lowered her voice. "You wouldn't think so to look at him, but Franklin takes up quite a bit of space." That made Sarah laugh, and my mother sat back satisfied and took the same sized bite out of her Twinkie. I decided to forego the muesli and take my apple to my room. After all, they hadn't even waited for me to reach the table to begin eating. My room is my sanctuary. No one is allowed in here. Certainly not my mother, whose boots have been in unseemly places and probably carry boatloads of bacteria on each sole. Every evening before I go to bed, I vacuum my carpet in an east-west pattern that never fails to show the footprints of intruders. Twice I've caught my mother, who claimed to be looking for her car keys. Bernie has tried too. Even the dog, Baron, before his untimely demise, breached security when my mother invited him in for half a ham sandwich. Everything in my room is neatly organized, categorized, and sterilized. My Lego kits are fully assembled and covered with the kind of protective plastic used in the dry cleaning industry. The sheets over my bookcases protect the pages from dust spores as well as damaging ultraviolet rays, and my diagnostic medical equipment is stored in a locked filing cabinet. Surge protectors and antivirus software keep my computer in good working condition. When not in use, it is covered with a heavy anti-static nylon cover. Having said all this, I think it's quite plain that havoc could be wreaked if visitors were allowed in here. After measuring my arms and legs and noting the slight variations from yesterday in my notebook, I sat on my bed and thought about what to do. Should I eat my apple slowly to aid in digestion? Should I add Stuart Little to my database? Should I read another chapter of Diet for a Poisoned Planet? I walked to the entrance of my room and poked my head into the hall, where I heard the sound of laughter and talk floating down from the kitchen. "Why does he do a thing like that?" Sarah asked. "Hold still, this might hurt a little," my mother said. My mother replied, "He thinks his arms and legs are two different sizes. Am I pulling too hard?" "Go on and pull. You can't hurt me." There was a long silence, during which I imagined Sarah Kervick in serious pain. "Are they?" she asked, kind of grunting it out as if through clenched teeth. "Sorry, what? Are they different sizes, his legs?" "Oh, they might as well be. Franklin looks so hard for what's wrong with him. He's bound to turn up something." I went back inside my room and closed the door. At this stage of my life, it might be nice to have a decent friend, I thought, mentally crossing my mother off the list. Someone tidy like myself, someone who understood a sensitive young man. At the very least, perhaps I could have a mother who took my physical abnormalities seriously and who realized that not all boys were meant to play third base for the New York Yankees, even though their blood was indeed red. Take Hans Christian Andersen, for example. He had the widow Bunkefled to listen sympathetically when he poured out his troubles. She understood his little idiosyncrasies, like the languages he made up that no one could understand, and his need to stuff pamphlets into his clothes to make himself look bigger. Without her sympathy, we might never have had the Ugly Duckling or the Little Mermaid or the Steadfast Tin Soldier. Myself, I would prefer someone a little younger with all her own teeth and no dowager's hump. I'd been thinking very seriously about what Gloria said, but it never went anywhere. There was a certain someone at school who had caught my eye, but I didn't have a shred of evidence that I'd caught hers. I don't know what it was. As I sat there on the edge of my bed, I felt paralyzed with the sadness. All of a sudden it hit me that there might not be a person on this earth who would ever appreciate me. Halfway through chapter 4.